get your end users involved early on, not at the end when you're implementing it, when you're in the ideation, the conceptualization stage. Get them involved, get the input, and make sure you put a diverse group of stakeholders together. And I think that's a good start.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of the Visual Lounge, and we're at LearningDev Camp, where we're talking to speakers and attendees about the various things that they're talking about here at the conference. And we're so excited to have Stella Lee with us. We're going to be talking something that we don't do a lot of on the show. We're going to be talking about a bigger picture strategy around learning and development, which I think is really important to think about, even if you're a developer or you're maybe at that higher level trying to figure out where you're going with your organization. So Stella, welcome.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, I'm so glad I get the chance to meet you. We've been connected a long time on LinkedIn, and it's probably like I'm just one of the people you never really see very much of. But
I've been following you too, Matt.
Well, thank you. So for those who maybe haven't had a chance to follow you or don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Stella Lee. I am based in Calgary, Canada. That's what we chatted about. And I've been in education technology for about 20 years. I stopped at 20. I lost count after. And I have a PhD in computer science. I have a background in arts and communication. I was trained as a portrait painter. And I've done consulting for the past 10 years. Before that, I was an academic.
So there's so much even just in there that we could probably talk about, but we'll save that for another time. But I do want to talk about strategy, because strategy, obviously, I have, and this is me, I found that strategy is one of those things that for a long time, I'm like, I don't get, when you say strategy, I don't get it, right? And but it's critical for organizations, particularly from a learning perspective. So when we're thinking about learning strategy, what are some of the key considerations that leaders should be thinking about upfront?
Yeah. I think, like you're right, strategy could be very abstract. And, but the way I like to frame it is, well, instead of focusing on like what tools are we using or what modalities are we focusing on, like first, let's get back to the basics, get back to the reasons, right? What are you trying to do? What are your goals? Like if you're implementing a program, an intervention, is it solving a problem? And because sometimes learning isn't your solution, right? Like, it could be a communication problem, it could be a performance problem, but sometimes it is a learning problem. So make sure you are, getting that down. And also, are you addressing a pain point? And if there's an opportunity that you wanted to unearth. So I would start with framing strategy that way. Starting with like, what are your goals? What do you hope to achieve? And is learning one of the solutions, or it might sometimes could be the only one. It could be a suite of solutions whereby learning intervention is one of them. Right. Well, I'll start from there.
Well, it takes me back, and I'm, I like your advice. Stop at 20. It takes me back to grad school though, and we did a lot of thinking about systems thinking, right? Like. Yeah. So looking at the system as a whole, and I love that learning is just one of the solutions. Right. So as you're giving advice to leaders about, like, as they're going through this process and, like you said, set some goals, figure out what the pain is, what advice would you give to leaders right now that are watching this and trying to figure those things out? Because I do think it's easy for us to sit here and say, like, oh, think of your goals. What is the pain? Yeah. But sometimes it's a lot harder, at least I know from my experience, to be like, oh yeah, this is a really clear, good goal. So how do you help leaders to figure out what those things should be?
Yeah, good question. I would say put a stakeholder group together. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, you're in a leadership position. Sometimes you might be a little bit removed from the day-to-day. It get back to design thinking, for example. It's having having empathy, get your ideas out there, having empathy with your end users, whoever your intervention is aiming for, validate with that, right?
Right.
Like, you can think, oh, this is a problem in your office, but is it actually the problem? Same with when you're implementing a modality, when you're selecting a technology solution, validate, get your end users involved early on, not at the end when you're implementing it, when you're in the ideation, the conceptualization stage, get them involved, get the input, and make sure you put a diverse group of stakeholders together. And I think that's a good start.
Okay, so we've got this great start. When you're going through that process, I imagine with your experience, you've seen where things fall apart, because as soon as you bring your group together, there's always challenges. So what are the typical kind of organizational challenges that you see that cause that to, I don't want to say fail, because that's not fair, but what are the typical barriers you find that you're trying to overcome in those situations that, like, I imagine some of it's you just don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm getting into, so what I have to prepare for.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
Problem. I think sometimes it's also we get attracted to the wrong thing. A lot of times you go to a conference, you're like, oh my God, like we have to use Gen AI now. It's my competitors using it, everybody else is using it, and we'll be behind, right? So you get pulled in these directions without understanding, like, why are you understanding why are you doing that? And it's same with, like, managing, well, that's a whole other conversation about managing stakeholder group. But again, like communication, I think it's like change management, communications. Like sometimes we also forget and add it on at the end of the process. Like when we're about to launch something, we think about communication, we think about change management. But especially now with AI tools coming into the mix, trust is a big issue.
Right.
They are research saying people don't have a perceived trust in what you're doing in the technology, with all the privacy issues, with ethical issues, with unintentional and perhaps even intentional biases baked into the system. People might not want to use it, right? When you talk about, why are they low adoption? That's a big contributing factor. The other ones is not understanding culture of your organization, like meeting where people are at instead of implementing something. Perhaps there's a misalignment, not just at the knowledge and skill level, but also what are people's attitudes and where are they coming from? You can't just force it onto people without, explaining, preparing, understanding where they're at. So attitudes, culture, understand also from an operational perspective what needs to be in place. It's a big one. And then also looking at your staff capability and capacity. I know L&D, I talk about that before we are tired. It just one hype cycle of different tech after another. So don't focus on that.
Yeah.
So it's my focus is never on the tools. It's always started with your problems.
Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because your problem should define the tools. But can I ask you a tool question? Can we talk about a modality? We're on the visual lounge, so we can. So I'm curious.
And I have a visual background, so I love to talk about visual.
Absolutely. Well, I realized after we started, maybe that would have been the conversation would have been fun for me to ask you about that. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but from your perspective, especially as you kind of look again that higher level, you're looking at the strategy, you're trying to pull these things together, and we're all about video, at TechSmith and in the Visual Lounge, and I'm curious from your perspective, how is that? What role do you think video plays in those strategies? And I know it's going to be very general because it's going to be circumstantial. It's going to be based on kind of the stakeholder group input. It's going to be a lot of things. But from your perspective, what you're seeing, how is video getting applied in ways that maybe surprise you, or you think like maybe it's just creative approaches to some of this L&D problem solving?
Yeah, I think the visual culture has shifted with the newer technologies, right? I think there was like an interest in video-based learning a little while back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's making a comeback because in light of all the new AI tools. And I mean, look, like I can create a video with a text prompt. Like I no longer have to actually go and put graphics together or shoot a video. And so that kind of opened up more doors for people that maybe perhaps previously felt like it's a barrier. So I think that's going to be a lot more creative videos out there. I think there's going to be, especially with all the generative AI models out there that have multimodality now.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very interesting to see what kind of creative process people are playing with that. And in addition to that, I see more edtech platforms like LMS and other learning platforms have that built-in functionality, right? You can build content, and content is not just text. A lot of that also have video and audio creation functionality. So I think if anything else is much more, it's more accessible from a barrier to entry perspective, but also from like access to visual resources perspective that, people can generate literally thousands, if not millions of images that you can kind of do a collage in a video.
Right.
And also the variety of styles. I think we get more exposure now to understand and looking and trying out a variety of styles. I'm old enough to remember when you have to like render things all night. When
Yep.
When multimedia first came out, I remember as a student, like you start rendering something and it takes like hours. And now, how long does it take to generate, videos and images and music and everything else, right? Literally seconds.
Yeah.
So I think, and perhaps it's going to be like a lot more other things like quality is another concern. But it's definitely going to be people are experimenting with lots of different things.
Well, it sounds like I think some of it is based on a conversation from another episode of Visual On with Josh Cavalier about it's going to break down barriers, right? Because inherently the video has barriers because people need to learn the craft.
Every tech is a barrier, right?
Right. Yeah. And so it does sound like that will be a great opportunity to continue growing. And for anyone that's listening, if you haven't seen the stuff that TechSmith talked about as potential future features, I mean, we're going there too, right? With Camtasia and possibilities of generating like a video from a screenshot, right? But it does feel like that does open up this kind of world of new creative, because also, I mean, I think about the AI scene, and some of it's not practical yet, but some of it it's going to make things, it's going to change the way we look at how we do the craft.
Like as learning professional and other like potential tasks we can take on, it's quality control, right? Yeah. Because it's going to be so much more content. There's already more content. Did you know that currently there are more AI generated images than there are entire history of photography of people taking photos?
I did not know that. Oh my goodness.
Yes, that's how fast things are going. So imagine the quantity we're going to get.
Which becomes a problem, because if it's not good, and so I love that we're going to be in charge of the quality, right? Like, because not everything is a masterpiece.
And copyright issues and biases within that, and I think a lot of the ethical issues would also could potentially, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to fall into our domain. So I think it's to me that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, Stella, this has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for taking time. If people wanted to connect with you, they want to learn more about the work that you're doing, where should they go?
My website, paradoxlearning.com. And I'm happy to engage in any conversation on LinkedIn. So search for me, LinkedIn, just Stella Lee, Lee. So those are the two places I'm most active.
Perfect. And we'll make sure those links get into the information below. Thank you again. Look, the world is changing fast, but you have to have good strategy. And good strategy leads to good design and good operationalization of the things that you need to do to solve, whether it's a problem, a learning issue, whatever it might be. But take some time to make sure you're understanding this. Even if you're thinking, well, strategy is not my thing, it's worth learning a little bit about that strategy and where your organization's going so that you can make better decisions in the design. And with that said, like we say at the end of every show, we just hope you take a little time to level up every single day.